Hey everybody, how's it going?
It's a good morning for me so far.
Awesome. So we are here to present Getting Real Without Getting Fired. My name is Marcus King, and this is the other host, Allison Pollard. Allison, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm an agile coach here in Dallas. I work for Improving. We're a consulting and training company. And my passion is helping people discover their agile instincts and develop their coaching abilities. So I'm often working with leaders and scrum masters on how can we set teams up for success and create that high trust environment for them to really exceed the customer's delights in what the product can do.
Yeah, and my name's Marcus King. I'm a software developer, architect, and technical coach. And I really love working with teams, seeing what they're capable of doing, and just watch a team that usually when I step in, they're not fully coherent, they're not fully able to deliver, and I really like to see them coalesce around a common goal and start delivering for the business, whoever their customer happens to be.
Yeah. And you and I had the pleasure of working together on a client, and that was really the origin of this particular talk. Because our role as coaches and consultants means that we're coming in to deliver some hard messages to the executives, to the teams, but we have to do it in a way that builds trust so that they're actually willing to hear it and not just escort us out of their office. And
Yeah,
so
we're typically in low trust environments. I think that's
right?
probably safe
Yeah,
to
that
say.
that's
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
good point. Like there's some kind of a problem. That's why they brought in consult. So to kick this off, we found in the chat, who of these characters would you trust the most and why?
So if I had to pick a guy here, I would pick
Mm-hmm.
a girl.
Mm.
Everybody who knows me knows I'm a huge Minnie Mouse fan. And so as the live chat's picking up who they wanna trust, I would trust Minnie Mouse because I love Minnie Mouse and I love Disney. Now I've been told I've been wrong on that. For me, Ty Guy, he's an attractive looking guy, but he kind of looks like a used car salesman almost. Like he might be up to no good.
He kind of
Um,
looks like he's interviewing to me, like it's not
yeah,
often that you see the blazer jeans and the tie. It's really the tie that I think puts it over the top.
yeah. There's just something about the way he's looking at me that just makes me not wanna. I'm a little standoffish towards him. Whereas Minnie, she's kind of cute and innocent. And it's like she's like, hey, like I just want to have some fun and let's go enjoy Disney World. I'm all about Disney World.
All right, so
So
we have one person that agrees with you on Minnie Mouse, but there are two folks saying Darth Vader. And I as I think about it, this makes a lot of sense because as we're all sheltered in place, like Darth Vader has the ability to like force choke you in person, which was handy, way back when. He could do it from like a social distance, like a couple feet away. That's really responsible and I appreciate that. But he can actually force choke you when he's in a completely different location. So, his skills really seem to apply in a wide variety of situations, and he's always clear on what he's expecting from people. So, I can see where I could trust him.
I could trust Darth Vader too, and let's be honest, he's holding a weapon in his hand, right? And so I
There's
kind of
that.
already know his intent. I kind of know what he's up to. I don't know if I can trust somebody when I can't see their eyes. And so for me, that's the only part where I'm like, do I really want to trust this guy? Because I don't even know if he's making faces at me right now.
That's
Um,
that's
yeah,
fair. That's fair.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, when we talk about like those conclusions, we've been sharing out loud some of our thinking, and people are recognizing, like Minnie Mouse, she has to play by the children's show rules, whereas like Darth Vader, like he's got his own agenda, his own set of rules that he can operate by. I think your point on like Darth and not being able to see his eyes is a really good one. And I've recognized like now that I'm on all these video calls it's much harder to like feel like I'm really connected with someone, because it means I'm having to look at my camera so that they can see that I'm really interested in connecting with them. But in order for me to like kind of get the visual feedback, like I might have to look away to like wherever the video lives on my screen. And as I like move my head, that means I'm disconnecting from them. So it's a lot harder, in this kind of format for us to build trust with that body language that we've been accustomed to.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's all kind of font, or not font smoothing, video smoothing, and
Mhm.
other algorithms in place for these live chats that make it, or not just live chats, but any kind of chat program, whether it's Microsoft Teams, Zoom, you name it, right? And it makes it really difficult for people to read the body language of others, and whether or not you're aware of it, whether or not you think you're good at this, or it's something that you do, subconsciously we're always doing this. And so in a digital format like this, building trust is really complex and really difficult.
Right, right. So that's like some of the decisions that are going on in our head as we're in calls like this to evaluate, do I trust this person? Do I not? But I'm thinking also too, like we were joking, right? Like Darth Vader, he has like clear expectations. Minnie Mouse, she has like a certain set of rules that she's gonna operate by. Ty guy, we're still kind of questioning, like is he that used car salesman? Is he interviewing? Like what's he trying to prove? uh, you know, what is it that we can do to actually like communicate that we want to build trust? How do we set forth like our expectations or like share our intentions? Seems to be like a thing that's popping up for me, on, have I told people like why I'm in this call with them, or like what we're trying to accomplish together? Do they understand what my role is?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head there with the context is key on a lot of this stuff, right? You can hear something and think and assume you understand the context, but until you really spell it out, it just makes for a better conversation sometimes if you just put the context out there, even if it's
Hmm.
sometimes a little bit painful to do so.
Yeah, so let's jump into trust a bit deeper. So when we kind of like put a box around it, and we have this great quote from Stephen R. Covey that trust is the highest form of human motivation. It brings out the very best in people.
So let's kind of go back in the way back machine here, Allison. And I'm gonna tell a quick story about I guess low trust. Does that seem okay to do right now?
Uh,
I
I'm willing to go there if you want to go there.
Yeah, sure. So at a former client, I had the privilege of going there, and they were actually having problems delivering. This is the client Allison and I were talking about, and I get there, and on the very first day, I kind of get asked, "What am I even doing here?" So I get introduced to the team. The team didn't really know why I was there. Their boss hadn't told them I was showing up, and
Hmm.
so I was put in a very big trust deficit kind of position from day one, hour one, by totally something outside of my control.
Yeah.
And I know you struggled with this as well on that day, did you not?
It was really strange because I of course had joined this client earlier, and I went through like a full round of interviews like with the whole team, with the director, with the COO. The COO had actually shared with me like their company values, and transparency was like one of the top five. Like it shaped how they set up their office. So like all of the executives had open desks, all of the conference rooms had glass doors. This was a really big deal for them. And I remember like the day before you started, I had been out. I had to leave early to take care of some things. And so the morning that you're coming in, I get a text message as I'm driving to the office from the scrum master. And she goes, "Hey, did you know like we're getting a Marcus?" And I'm looking at this going, yeah, did you know that you're getting a Marcus? Like, how did the communication fall down? Like what has happened here? Because I had taken it for granted that of course Marcus would have it would have been communicated that he's joining and like what his role is. And people would have been like, excited to have this technical coach, an architect to help them get through some of the technical difficulties they were facing.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just define trust. And let's just kind of, I hate reading slides. I'm not going to read this to everybody. I'm not that guy. I want to key in on one word though here, if I may, and that's in the synonyms. That's the word faith. And to me, trust is faith, and I don't mean this in a religious aspect. I just mean it from an aspect of I'm putting faith in someone else that they are going to do what they say they are going to do. And that sounds really simple and really easy, but how often do we show up and somebody says, I don't trust that person, right? Back to activity one. They might not even know that person. And maybe in that environment, that person doesn't seem trustworthy, but in different environments, they are very trustworthy. And I would almost bet that most people who aren't trusted by some are trusted by others. And so it's really weird how, and I'm sure this is true for me as well, as it is for everybody else, how you can break trust with people and not even realize it sometimes. And then it's what are you going to do to get that trust back from those people? And then more importantly, what is it you can do to position yourself to have as many people trust you from the get-go as possible, which, Allison, you can speak to this as a consultant, is really important when you walk in the door on day one, that you start building that trust and that you're viewed as a trustworthy person from the very outset of your engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember when I started at this client, the Scrum Master had been involved in the interview. And after I had started, working there for some time, I've been having some conversations with her, getting to know her, observing how she worked with the team. And one day she came up to me and she said, I'm really concerned. I have this feeling that you're here to evaluate me. And I don't know where I stand. I'm a little worried about my job. And to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of frustrated because, you, Allison, you've been able to come in and make some changes and get like all this support from the executives and like make it happen. This is stuff that she had already been raising for the last couple of months and hadn't been able to get any traction with it. And so, hearing her out and then saying, you know what? Yeah, part of my job is here to evaluate you. And honestly, like, here's what I'm already noticing and what I like, like I'm excited to see that like every member of the team has some note or some gift that you've given them at some point in time. It shows me that like you are the heart of this group. You're the one that shows them the appreciation and the respect that they deserve, and that they really count on that from you. I can also see how much you care about the product and you care about the company culture, and you're willing to go like above and beyond in your Scrum Master responsibilities. And so she and I actually then like partnered together, and I said, tell me, like, what are the other ideas that you've wanted to implement? Obviously, if it's a bad idea, we're going to have a conversation and I'm going to say, whoa, I'm not taking that one to management. But there was absolutely some ideas that she had where I was like, oh, you know what? I hadn't quite gotten that far, but like, let's see what we can do. And so I was able to help her like really embrace like her strengths and like her abilities as a Scrum Master to like really fill that role and like better, and then also move more into like an agile coach type of position for them internally. Because I was very clear, like I'm a consultant, I am not going to be here, for forever. Like someone needs to be able to do this after I'm gone, and I really do think you're the one. But let's like work towards that and see where we stand, after a while. And it worked out brilliantly.
Yeah. So I'm going to read this. I take that back. I said I won't read the quote, but read the quote. And I want to continue that story I was telling a little bit ago, and kind of took the same path that Allison did. So in this meeting, I had one of these engineers there who literally stood up in front of the team, and there were probably 10-ish people in this meeting, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. I'm not sure, or a little bit less. I'm not sure, but he just said, well, I don't understand what you're doing here, because we already know what needs to be done to deliver these products and deliver these features. And so we don't need you. You can pretty much just go home. And that was really hard. And so I turned it around on him, kind of the same way Allison just explained. I said, hey, you know what? That's great, because I was asked to come in and figure out what needs to be done. So if you already know that, I would love to be able to hear that from you. And then since I already have the ear of your executive staff, I'm happy just to take your ideas and present them to them as your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, you got some phenomenal engineers that already have an idea of what needs to be done. What do you think about these? And that kind of stopped him in his tracks, because he immediately realized I was on his side.
Yeah.
And I was listening to him, and he had my attention, and I wasn't just kind of brushing him to the side. And it kind of comes back to, there's two mentalities here that I was trying to convey to him. Is I was willing to listen. I was listening before I was speaking in that
Mm-hmm.
regard.
Mm-hmm.
I was the expert, but I was willing to, and I'm using expert in that YouTube video format.
Of course.
I was willing to listen to what somebody else had to say, and then actually take his advice as opposed to coming up with my own. And I was willing to learn. So if you have a challenging situation, coming at it from a listening first and a learner attitude, at least for me, seems to really work out well in that regard.
Yeah, and I remember having one of those moments like that. It's just pure low trust, right? Like took my breath away, low trust. The team has, been working in Scrum. They've been collaborating better, communicating better. We're starting to see their ability to like deliver small stories like every couple of weeks. Like really great progress has been made. The director comes over, he tells the team like, I so appreciate the work that you've done. You're all doing a great job of embracing these changes, and I'm seeing the positive results. Like, this is awesome. Keep at it. And he says, hey, Allison, can I talk to you for a second in the training room? And I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. And so, we walk into the training room, he closes the door, and he says, okay, I'm wondering, I would like to hire a more senior developer. I really want to like top grade this team. And who should be the first developer that I let go, after I've brought in someone that's better? I was stunned. Like that was the like low trust moment of like, oh my God, like I just saw you tell this team like what a great job they're doing. And that was so awesome. I see them light up and like feel that appreciation. And now I'm like 10 feet away in a conference room, and we're having a conversation of like who should get fired first. That didn't make sense to me. And so I really, like you said, Marcus, like listen first of like more about what you're thinking here, because the Scrum Master and I are trying to form a team, and the way that teams work, like if you bring someone new in and like pull someone out, really hard for them to continue to like work together and collaborate and like focus on the delivery, because now we're going to instill fear, and folks are going to be so scared for their jobs that they're going to go back to the way that they had been working previously of working in silos, hoarding information, and we would see more like CYA kind of activities. And
Yeah.
it was a tough conversation, and I still didn't feel like I had really like gotten like clear resolution by the end of it. But just knowing like, I tried to listen, I tried to share my viewpoint, and here's the concerns, the consequences if we start going down that path, that we could, at least continue dialogue after that point.
Yeah. So let's go to the model. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So there is this model where perceptions are reinforcing the behavior. It's the collusion diagram. It's been written about in a couple of books by the Arbinger Institute, and we thought it'd be really helpful. So we start off like I do something. I have some kind of behaviors, and they're not so great. Like I'm having a bad day, and I start taking it out on someone. Well, they see that and like, man, what is with Allison? Like, that is not cool. And then because they're interpreting it as like Allison is just like not such a great person right now, they do something that isn't so great. And I see that and go, ugh, what is with them? how dare they? And we see the cycle play out. So when one person does something to destroy the trust or hurt the trust, the other people see it. They form conclusions around it. They start acting accordingly. And this is where we end up in this like negative cycle. It gets to the point, I've seen this with other groups, like factions start to form. It's like clear us versus them. It might have started off with just two individuals, but they've now like got tribes built up around them. Like people have like chosen who they're going to ally with. And it just continues to like grow out of proportion and affect the culture more deeply. And so for me, like, how do I recognize when I might be falling into this? Like, how do I check myself for my behaviors and certainly for my perceptions?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from people that are watching. Have you ever seen this? Is this something that you've seen in your work environment or other work environments you've been in the past? I think that, and it doesn't always have to be as aggressive as somebody blowing up in the middle of a meeting. It could be as simple as
Right.
I'm paying attention to my phone during meetings and not paying attention to the actual meeting, right? Then and
Mm-hmm.
you do that over time, everybody's on their phone in meetings, and now nobody's actually engaged in what it is you met to get done anyway. And really, the place that I see this kind of, and I don't want to necessarily say it's always bad behaviors. It could just be different behaviors, different expectations of how people interact with each other in the workplace. Is M&A,
Yeah.
right? Merger acquisition stuff, where two companies come together and they have different cultures, and now you see different people behaving in ways that the other faction didn't necessarily expect.
Right.
And so then it just kind of breeds this us versus them mentality. And how do you break through that to really get both companies now to come together as one and form a new culture,
Right.
as one company?
Yeah, yeah. And again, thinking about, as we've all responded, to the COVID crisis, like the working agreements, the norms that we had previously, might not apply as we're all sheltered in place. And so you're right. Things that I'm doing might seem normal or appropriate to me, but someone else might have a different interpretation and go, oh, like that's not okay, right? Like it might not be okay for me to have like left my office door open and suddenly have like a pet, crawling around my desk in a meeting. Others, seem to like embrace that and go, oh my God, like put him up in front of the camera. I want to see him, and derail the agenda for a few minutes. It goes back to, you're right, the culture. Like, what is it we expect from one another? What is it we can count on one another for? And like, how do we need to show up in order to do that?
Yeah,
So to
definitely.
help us with that, I think what we've highlighted, Marcus, is that you and I recognize that direct communication is a really big tool in how can we set the relationship up for success, or how can we like reset it if we need to.
Yeah. So I noticed in the comments, a couple people say they're currently going through this.
Hmm.
Super relatable, right? And so what one thing I've done in this, and at that specific client, and I've done it at other clients as well, is I try to call out the elephant in the room sometimes.
Yeah.
um, and that can either go really well or really poorly depending on how you do it. So I'm not advocating kind of stand up and stand on your chair in a very Dead Poet Society way. That's definitely not what I'm advocating for.
Right.
But maybe just, and usually it helps to not state it. Don't make a declarative sentence about it, but to kind of ask questions, right?
Hmm.
And probe, because it could be that you're assuming the wrong thing as well. And so for me, it's about asking the right questions at the right time, and having enough situational awareness to say, hey, this might be a good point in this meeting to ask, I notice there's a low trust environment going on, or I notice that I think what's happening here is that this group of people or this person doesn't trust what this other person is saying. Could there be a reason why that is? Maybe could somebody elaborate on what I think I'm picking up on, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, go on, Allison. Sorry.
Yeah, I remember very distinctly, like there was one meeting in particular where, like the developers, the scrum master, us, the director are all meeting, and the director was like very clearly trying to push something. And I don't remember what the exact idea was. But he had been talking and talking and talking, and there was that tension in the room. And I love that you call it like the elephant in the room, because I sometimes feel like you could almost like smell the elephant, right? Like that, just like, oh God, like something really awful is like happening right here in front of us. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
But you very gently, said it feels like there's a lack of trust. And because you did it like so openly and like without judgment, it actually gave the development team like the way to just say, yeah, you're right. And here's what it is. Like we don't have a very good track record with our director. We've had conversations before and he'll say that he supports a thing, but then, something changes later. So we're just feeling like, a lack of confidence, that this is for real. And I think, from our standpoint, it's like, great. Like once we know that, we can now have conversations about like, so what does it mean for us to do this? And how are we going to know, if it's working, and like, what do we need to do? Like pre-planning, like if it starts to change or we don't feel the support, like how are we going to call that out? Like how are we going to acknowledge like future elephants if we need to?
Yeah, yeah, I really think that's important. I've had a client where they had a few of their kind of more senior level people leave, and that was devastating to the organization at the time because they felt like, these are the people that really have all the knowledge of all these systems that we have in place. And when something goes wrong or we need to know something, we go to these people and we ask them, and they can point us in the right direction.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
now they've left, and we don't know what to do because when there's a problem, we're not going to be able to figure it out.
Right.
And you kind of just have to say, so what is it you're really worried about? And sometimes it's job security, sometimes it is truly like the anxiety of a production issue they can't solve and they lose their customer base, or a part of their customer base. And there's a lot of encouragement and other tools that kind of go into place there, that you have to say, you're a smart person, you'll figure this out. Sure, the first few weeks, maybe couple of months, are really going to be awful, right? We're going to have to step through some things and look at some code that maybe we didn't realize we'd ever have to look at or even think about. But this is going to force us to to kind of up our game, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
and become better and more intimately aware of the code base and the interactions between the different systems that we didn't maybe have to deal with in the past. And turns out a couple months later, everybody, not that they don't remember that person, but they kind of look back on it as oh, this was a growing opportunity. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was positioning it in that manner that allowed them to realize that they're going to be fine.
Yeah, yeah. I dig that. So like when I think about how am I going to engage in this like kind of difficult conversation, or just like how do I break through some of the tension that might exist in the room, the radical candor model, comes up for me. And I love the simplicity of it. This was written about and talked about by Kim Scott, and she has shared examples on how, you know how much do you care personally, how much do you challenge directly, and if the other person can sense those, you're in a really great position. So the more that I care about you personally, the more that I'm like willing to challenge you directly, I'm going to be in that radical candor spot. And you're going to know I'm bringing this up because I really want to help you. I really want to see you like grow. I really want to see you succeed. That's why I'm engaging in this difficult situation or this difficult conversation with you. And she shares a personal example of actually she used to work for Sheryl Sandberg, and so Cheryl's her boss and is talking to her after Kim has given this like really high pressure presentation to the executives. And Kim is just so thankful that she's made it through this talk. Like she was nervous and anxious going into it, and now she can breathe a sigh of relief. But Cheryl's talking to her, afterwards and asking, like, how do you think it went? And would you consider working with a coach, on your communication skills, your speaking skills? And Kim's like, yeah, I'm good. Like, no big deal. I'm glad that this is over with. I think it went rather well, all things considered. Well, Cheryl can tell that Kim is not quite picking up on the clues that she's been leaving for her, and she doesn't have awareness of some of the things that had happened in that particular meeting. And it gets to the point where Cheryl just finally comes out and says, Kim, you sound like an idiot when you say every 3 words. And that's a pretty hard message for someone to hear, but it was the exact clarity in order for it to get through to Kim to realize, oh, I didn't realize that the ums were that bad. I knew I used them here and there. I didn't, recognize that it was painting that poor of a perception of me. And that's obviously not how I want leaders thinking of me. So yeah, let's talk about that coach and how they might be able to help me going forward. What I find in most organizations is that we care so much about someone personally. Like, we want to be so nice and so kind that we're not willing to have that tough conversation. And this is the spot on the upper left that Kim refers to as ruinous empathy. And this is where, Marcus is such a great teammate, and he makes jokes and he makes everyone laugh. I'm going to let some of his mistakes go for a while. And it might catch up with us. And there comes a point where it's like, oh, the stakes have gotten higher. And now I need to have an extra difficult conversation with Marcus because I didn't tell him about the previous mistakes or the previous challenges that were getting us to this point. And now he's used to me being like really friendly and really nice. And so when I come out and say, hey, Marcus, we have a problem, or like we need to have a serious conversation, he's stunned, he's taken aback. And this is where people sometimes fall into situations where they're laid off or fired and didn't realize that, there were things going on previously that they could have taken control of, they could have been working on, but they just weren't aware of it. So when Kim talks about this model, obviously we're aiming for radical candor, but the second best place to be, as she explains it, is actually the lower right. And that's what she refers to as obnoxious aggression. And I think for those of us in IT, like we might kind of go, oh, are we sure? Because we've seen some obnoxious aggression, within teams. That can be really rough and really awkward. But what it does offer is that like the point that needed to be made got out there. It might have been really unskillful. It might have been hurtful to someone else. But we can at least recognize like where someone stands and like what's important in that situation. And now we can go and coach them on how do we deliver that message differently, and how can we continue to like build the relationships where we don't have to like speak like quite so bluntly with one another. Like how can we get better at listening so that every person feels the safety and the responsibility to share their thoughts within this particular group so that we can really find the best solutions. Now, as Marcus and I have kind of talked about this model in the past, this lower left quadrant on manipulative insincerity, it's not one that you encounter very often, but I'll tell you that moment where the director wanted to talk to me about who to let go after just appreciating his team felt like a manipulative insincerity moment for me. And I know it hindered my ability, at least for a short period of time, on to care and like, what is it that I'm willing to feel more cautious now? And so I've recognized like anytime I'm feeling that need to like walk on eggshells with somebody, there's something that needs to be clarified to help like build in the safety or like build back the trust, so that we can be, a really great partnership.
Yeah, and one thing I like to bring up, because when we have this model in front of us here, and to me is when we gave this talk a couple of years ago or something, somebody stood up and kind of asked the question, well, for me, obnoxious aggression seems difficult. This was a very quiet individual. You could tell just by the way they presented themselves, right? They were super quiet. They didn't want to even offend us as they were kind of asking the question. That's almost how it came across to me. And we pointed out to them, and this is true for anybody, right? Um, one's person, what she might think is obnoxious aggression is probably going to be taken as radical candor to other people because of where she sits in this model on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
She is way over in that ruinous empathy quadrant, to the point that even if she comes over just even slightly into radical candor, she might think she's being aggressive and obnoxious. Most
Hmm.
people are going to go, this person never tries to offend anybody. And so the
Yeah.
fact that she's even telling, me this, I need to listen to what this person has to say. And so I thought that was super important, that you need to be aware that it's okay to kind of push the limits of maybe even what you're comfortable with, in order to kind of bridge the gap sometimes into
Hmm.
radical candor.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I do remember like the scrum master that we were working with, like she's high empathy. She is all about caring for the individuals. That's why they always had like a note or a gift, from her, showing her appreciation. That was like one of her superpowers. And so as we started working together, I was like, she's caring personally, I'm challenging directly. It's like a good cop, bad cop dynamic. But we had to like change things after a while, and I said, you know what, in order for me to like leave with a clear conscience, I need you to step into challenge directly. I need to see that you can play bad cop in some circumstances, that you're really willing to like address the stuff that matters the most, because this group needs it from you, the company and the team. And it was uncomfortable for her, but after she had been observing me, and how I do it, she could kind of find her own path into it. And I could provide her some support and some feedback in that. And quite honestly, like I learned an awful lot about empathy, watching her in action. And so like both of us got to grow through that relationship.
So as we proceed to the next slide here, Allison, real quick, I wanted to address a question that was asked in the chat. Do hidden salary rates in a company, do you consider that a form of a manipulative tool?
Mm,
I will say that I personally don't. I think when you are very open about salary at a company, and I've actually seen this just and some of my dealings with clients, that when people find out what other people make sometimes, or when that's talked about a lot, it can lead to other problems that kind of are not worth dealing with if that information had been kept maybe under wraps. I will say with things like Glassdoor and other websites where salaries in general for individuals at different companies, and you kind of get an idea of what market rates look like. If you know that your company is above 10% above market rates typically, or 20% below, that gives you a good guess where everybody kind of sits for the most
mm.
part. Do you really need to know that the person sitting next to you is making twice as much? Are you going to be a better employee for knowing that? Probably not. It'll probably put you into the obnoxious aggression category, and you might wind up getting yourself fired as a result. So,
That could,
I
yeah,
would,
you're right. That could be a tricky one because, like, unless we're like a small enough, company and have this like strong collaborative, culture, and we actually like all kind of weigh in on like how do we split a bonus, between a group,
yeah,
and like really use that, productively to acknowledge like who's put in the most effort or who's grown the most, and make these it almost feels like these like ideal like adult like super wise kind of decisions. uh you're right, it can kind of like spiral downwards just because there's so many different factors that it could cause like the wrong behaviors, right? Like we might be instilling competitiveness instead of the cooperation that we were looking for because we're just focused on that one data point of the salaries.
yeah, yeah. Great question though. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
So as we come here, this quote kind of sums up a lot of what we've been talking about, which is building trust, asking questions instead of maybe declaring what you see, but stating it in the form of a question to let people respond to it, and then really truly seriously listen to what they're saying,
Hmm.
helps with all of this. And I think it's super important to realize that as you grow in an organization, as you become a leader, and I don't mean you know a director or a VP or a senior VP. You know, I just mean a leader, with somebody who's viewed as a thought leader within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes more difficult, not less. You know, you're early in your career, I'm guilty of this. When I started early in my career, and I was just an engineer, and I saw a team lead, I thought, man, if I get to team lead, everything will just go smoothly because then I can get my way.
Yeah.
And then I got to team lead, and I realized that that wasn't the case, because I had an architect and, you know, a director above me who were saying, or a manager above me saying, "Oh, I need you to do it this way because it fits into the bigger picture of what we're trying to get done." I thought, if I can just get to, you know, X position or Y position. And what I realized, especially through my consulting, is the higher up in an organization you go, the more difficult it is for you to get your way, because you're instilling what you want to get done into other people, and you need them
Yeah.
to follow you. You can't just tell them what to go do and they'll go do it. As great as that sounds in your head, it won't always work out for you that way. So you really have to get people on board.
Right. Yeah. I think especially like the executive gives the order, the people many layers below go do the thing, but they discover some information that starts to indicate this is a bad idea, this is the wrong path. That information very rarely makes its way back up to the executive. And so like we could have like a really like bad situation kind of brewing when we're just taking orders. But this idea of like how do we become like that trusted leader within our own organization, and that it's going to take some practice. You know, I think Marcus and I have recognized that journaling as a way of like preparing for tough conversations is really effective. And this is something that we do within our company. Our executives, you know, actually taught us this approach, and so we've modified the template a little bit, you know, for our own purposes, to use or to build upon that radical candor model and the collusion diagram that we talked about. So Marcus, I want us to walk through an example. And because you're so familiar with the performance journal, this is me like your 3 minute of coaching through
Sure.
it. Yeah.
And as we're doing this, I just want to, anybody watching, if they are happy to post questions, we have about, I think, 7 minutes left. So we'll go through this and try to answer a couple of questions before we have to wrap up.
Cool.
Yeah, so go ahead. So yeah, we're gonna kind of role play this, but I basically have to bubble up to my executive leader, that a death march we were on, you know, this game of chicken that we've all seen in other organizations, that we're gonna miss this deadline that everybody's been waiting for us to deliver
Yeah.
on. So my goal here, Allison, is to not get fired. I know this executive, and I know I'm gonna be yelled at. I just want to not get fired.
That's a really clear desired outcome. I hear that. So the goal is to like keep your job, and it feels like there's like a real risk there. Like this could really go sideways pretty quickly. So I'm wondering, like, you know, do you trust this person? Do you care about them?
I don't, because they have fired individuals within the organization for what appears to be nothing.
Okay.
And so they don't really seem to care for too many people other than themselves. And so I don't necessarily care for this individual, which makes this conversation that much more difficult for me.
I hear that. Yeah. So this is like it's going to be that walking on eggshells, you know, kind of situation. It seems like that like there's some tentativeness on like how can I have this conversation when our relationship is pretty fragile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So then your willingness to challenge them directly, I imagine, is rather low.
A bit very
Yeah.
low indeed.
Got
Very
it.
low indeed.
All right. So let's think about like the you know previous conversation that you've had this with this executive. Like what did you do? What did you say? You know,
Um,
what did they do?
so the last conversation I had with this individual on this topic, I kind of said everything looks like it's tracking okay. I had not bubbled anything up yet.
Hmm.
And so I kind of knew maybe I would have to, but I
Yeah.
didn't do that.
Got it. So as you imagine, like what he thought, you know, like what he kind of felt, you know, hearing upon that, how would you describe it?
Well, he felt great about the last conversation because I told him everything was going to be going well. And so now
Yeah.
I need to go to him and kind of make amends and say, hey, I was I was wrong, and we're going to be late on this.
Mm.
And so that's kind of what I'm up against. I maybe was trying to avoid conflict in the previous conversation, and I shouldn't have done that.
Good self-awareness. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, so how did things like end with that conversation? Obviously, like you told him, it seems like we're on track. He felt confident about that. You know, did he say anything else afterwards?
He just had stressed how important it was that we deliver on time and that we not be late, because the marketing department already had a bunch of material and had already started talking about the delivery of this product to our customer base, and that our
Mm,
customer base was excited to see it on that given date.
yeah, yeah, got that. Cool. Well, someone really smart in the chat is saying like, I hope that person's not watching this right now. Because
I doubt it.
yeah.
This was this was almost 10 years ago I'm pulling this from.
I was
So
gonna say like your secret's out.
yeah.
But as you, this would not be the way to deliver that difficult news, by the way. Never set
Yeah,
up a
oh no.
webinar to tell the public before they told them. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so you know, and that's fun to just kind of like laugh a little bit and kind of like loosen up because like wow, that's a lot of pressure, that's a lot of tension.
Yeah.
Um, when you think about like what do you need to do, like how do you prepare, you know, for this conversation? You recognize like low trust, your willingness to challenge directly, kind of low as well, and you're trying to make sure that you're keeping your job, that you're not getting fired. What do you need to do? What do you need to reflect upon, you know, in advance of that? And what are some things that you want to communicate clearly during that conversation?
So I think I would definitely want to tell this individual that I have some bad news to break, and that I apologize for being late on something I had promised. Right, put myself
Mm,
in right at the get go. I would want to say, "Hey, listen, I have some hard news that I got to share with you. This
yep.
isn't easy for me, and
Hmm.
I do understand the impact of what this has, or you know what the impact this is going to have on our business."
I like that. I like that a lot. Like really, like that actually seems like some caring personally. And it's actually, you know, like I care about the thing you care about. That tells me like, like, okay, you understand like what's important. That like something that I like am really interested in and you're acknowledging that. Like I feel a stronger connection.
Yeah, and I think if I do that, that would put me at a position where this individual will hopefully want to work with me. I would want to express to them, you know, what is it we can do to help you hit your goal, because we still really want to hit it. We're just afraid we're not going to hit that deadline.
Yeah.
And is there anything we can do, you know, to try to get there, you know, overtime, whatever it can be, but what can we do to work with you guys to make sure that we hit our deadline? And if we don't, you know, what does that look like? And we really want to see this thing through. I would want to show my loyalty to this person during this conversation. Does that seem right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear. Like we would probably spend more than 3-4 minutes, you know, working through this as an exercise. And for me, like I find it to be very iterative. You know, like I might start working on say the left side of this like worksheet, and then I start going through the cycle and realize like, oh, I actually need to make some changes, or I need to add some notes to like that desired outcome, that desired impact, and you know I think what you're pointing to is like, what are some of the very specific items that I want to address in the conversation? Like, I might have that in my notebook that I bring with me. Not that I'm going to be like reading from my notes in this conversation, but I could like look down and like just have that light reminder to work it into the conversation. And I think the other cool thing about this is, I found it helpful to come back to it afterwards to kind of see like how did that go, how did it, how did I do, and like where might I try stuff differently going forward.
So it looks like
And
we are out of time.
yeah,
Go on.
so this creates this like new model of like I can respectfully challenge, they see that I care personally, or like I connect with the things that are important with them, and they will respond in kind. And so we create this new like generative model that's like a more positive cycle of trust. And if you
Yeah.
want to get in touch with us, we have our email addresses, or you can reach me at my blog.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. Thanks.